Have you ever heard someone say something they didn't really mean? We all have, right? But what if someone took those words literally? Today, we're diving into a classic fable that explores this exact situation, a story called The Mother and the Wolf. It's a tale that's more than just a simple story. It carries a powerful lesson about words, promises, and the danger of believing everything you hear. So grab a comfy seat and let's unravel this timeless piece of wisdom together. Early one morning, a wolf, driven by annoying hunger, found himself prowling around a small cottage on the very edge of a village. The air was still, and the first light of dawn was just starting to paint the sky. As he crept closer, his sharp ears picked up a sound from inside the house, the unmistakable wail of a crying child. The wolf's instincts kicked in. Where there was a child, there were people, and where there were people, there might be food. He paused, his body low to the ground, listening intently. Then he heard a woman's voice, the mother's voice, sharp with a mix of frustration and exhaustion. "Hush, child, hush," she said. "Stop your crying right now, or I will give you to the wolf." The wolf's ears perked up. He blinked. Could it be? Was this his lucky day? He couldn't believe his good fortune. A delicious meal practically offered to him on a silver platter. The idea was almost too good to be true. His hunger pangs intensified, and his mouth began to water at the thought. Surprised but absolutely delighted, the wolf decided this was an opportunity he couldn't miss. He found a spot right under an open window, concealed by a few bushes. From here, he could hear everything perfectly and be ready the moment the child was handed out. He settled down, his heart thumping with anticipation. He imagined the mother, fed up with the noise, simply tossing the child out the window to get some peace. He waited and waited. The sun climbed higher in the sky, beating down on his fur. The child inside continued to cry, sometimes loudly, sometimes just a low, continuous fret. With every fresh outburst, the wolf's hopes soared. This is it, he'd think to himself. Any second now, he pictured the scene over and over again. But the moments turned into minutes, and the minutes stretched into hours. Noon came and went. The afternoon sun began its slow descent. Still nothing. The wolf's initial excitement began to curdle into confusion, and then into a stubborn, hungry frustration. He had waited all day in vain. Why was she taking so long? Had she forgotten her promise? This part of the story really highlights the wolf's single-mindedness. He's operating purely on instinct and a very literal interpretation of the mother's words. He doesn't understand human emotion, exaggeration, or the empty threats parents sometimes make to quiet a child. To him, a promise is a promise, especially when it involves a meal. It's a fascinating look at the clash between the wild, literal world of the animal and the complex, nuanced world of human language. Now, as twilight began to settle, painting the village in shades of purple and orange, the wolf was about to give up. His stomach was growling louder than the child had been crying earlier. He was tired, hungry, and deeply disappointed. Just as he was preparing to slink back into the forest, defeated, he heard the mother's voice again. This time her tone was completely different. It was soft, gentle, and full of love. She was sitting near the same window, rocking her baby to sleep. She began to sing a lullaby, and her words drifted out into the cool evening air. "There, child, there," she crooned softly. "The wolf shall not get you. No, no. Daddy is watching, and Daddy will kill him if he should come near." The wolf froze, his ears flattened against his head. What was this? The same woman who had promised him the child was now singing about protecting it? She was saying the wolf would be killed if he even came close. The contradiction was staggering. It was a complete reversal of what he had been led to believe all day. The wolf was utterly bewildered. He had invested his entire day based on her first statement. He had been patient, he had been quiet, he had waited for his promised meal. And now, the promise was not only broken, but it was replaced with a threat against his own life. His world of simple, direct understanding had been turned completely upside down. He felt foolish, tricked, and more than a little angry. All that waiting, all that hope for nothing. Just as this new, confusing reality was sinking in, the wolf's sharp senses picked up a new development. A man, the father, was walking up the path towards the cottage. And he wasn't alone. Trotting alongside him were the village dogs, their noses to the ground. The wolf's brief moment of confusion was instantly shattered by a jolt of pure terror. The mother's second set of words suddenly made perfect horrifying sense. "Daddy will kill him," she had sung. The dogs caught his scent at the same moment. A chorus of barks erupted, shattering the evening peace. The wolf didn't hesitate for a second. Survival instinct took over completely. He scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding against his ribs. The dogs were closing in fast. He bolted, running faster than he had in a long time. It took every ounce of his strength and a good deal of clever maneuvering, darting and weaving through the trees at the edge of the forest, to finally shake them off his trail. He was barely able to save himself, escaping with nothing but his life and an empty stomach. As he finally found a safe place to catch his breath, panting heavily in the darkness of the woods, the lesson of the day hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had been a fool. He had based his entire day's actions on words that were never meant to be taken literally. The mother's morning threat was just that, a threat, an empty phrase spoken in a moment of frustration. Her evening song of protection was her true feeling. He had believed the lie but ignored the truth, and it had almost cost him everything. And that brings us to the core message of this fable, a piece of advice that is as relevant today as it was hundreds of years ago. Do not believe everything you hear. This is the moral of the story. Words can be powerful, but they don't always reflect reality. People say things they don't mean out of anger, frustration, or even jest. They exaggerate. They use figures of speech. The mother never intended to feed her child to a wolf. It was just a desperate attempt to find a moment of quiet. The wolf's mistake was his inability to understand context, to read the emotional tone behind the words. He took everything at face value, and it led him on a wild and ultimately fruitless goose chase. This story serves as a brilliant reminder for all of us to be discerning. We need to think critically about the information we receive. We should consider the source, the context, and the speaker's potential motives before we accept something as fact. In a world saturated with information, opinions, and noise, this ancient wisdom is more important than ever. It teaches us to look for the truth behind the words, to understand intention, and not to be led astray by empty promises or threats. It's a lesson in wisdom, patience, and the critical importance of not being as gullible as that poor, hungry wolf. Thank you so much for joining me for this story. I hope you found it as insightful as I do. If you enjoyed this journey into classic fables, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more stories and lessons from the past. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the story, or if you have a favorite fable you'd like me to explore next. Until then, stay curious and think critically. See you in the next video.